Hey everybody, how you doing today? Well, in today's lesson, I've been getting some emails from people wanting to do a little bit more of learning about portraits, whether working with their art journal and stuff like that. But for one reason or another, it's the idea of investing into professional paints is a bit daunting. And you know what? I've been there, so don't worry about that. They have craft paint. So I like to tell people, use what you have, work with that, learn about the paints. Once you understand what the paint can do for you when you're ready to move on, you'll be able to cut down on the number of paints you have and be able to buy better stuff. So when I first started painting, I would say this is probably just before I went to art school. I had to have every single color that was out there. Of all the paints that I could afford, had to have every single color. My mom made me a paint rack for my wall. Joe made me a table to hold all my paints on the side. This is when I broke my foot, so they were making stuff for me just to keep me quiet. And the paint was just overwhelming. Seriously, I mean, it was just so much paint. And then when I actually went to art school and then I started studying with some master artists, I'm thinking, oh my God. You don't need all that paint. You don't need 300 bottles of paint. You can get away with between 13 to 14, 15 max, including black and white. The challenge is when you're working with craft paint, you don't know what's in it. Yeah, the bottle looks like it's red, blue, violet, yellow, brown, but that's not what color is. Color is what you see. The temperature of the color, where it sits on the color wheel. Is it opaque? Is it transparent? Is it bright? Is it dull? Is it light? Is it dark? There's more to color, especially if you're wanting to go towards portraits. Now, for this particular lesson, we're not even going to go into the world of fine art, because with craft paint, there's only so much you can do with it. And I remember when I was having to do color mixing with craft paint, it was like sometimes the mixtures were like 3 or 4 of the colors. I think, oh, okay. But now when I look at it, I'm going, no. You go, if you can, at all possible, you go with the paints that have the color index number on the back. You limit it. You limit it down to only what you need. Because a lot of the paints, especially ones I want to show you, have white in them. And when I'm painting, I don't want white mixed in with my color. I want the pure pigment, and I want to choose to add white. But those paints come at a higher price. You use less paint, but it comes at a higher price. So I did some prep work ahead of time because I didn't want this video to be an hour. So I'm going to walk through as I go. So I'm going to be using the DecoArt Americana acrylic paints, and I'm going to call out the colors, then I'm going to tell you about the experiment I did. So I have, let's see, Holly Green, Primary Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Alizarin Crimson, Naphtha Red, Primary Yellow, Cadmium Yellow, True Ochre, Raw Sienna, just traditional burnt sienna, traditional burnt umber, raw umber, soft black, and a whole strip of snow titanium white. Doesn't matter what paint you have to know what's in the paint. You have to be able to read the color. So we're not even going to go over warm and cool colors, because the idea is anything that's red, orange, yellow are warm, and anything that's violet, blue, green are cool. What we need to focus on is how to read the color and where it sits on the color wheel. That's the key, where it sits on the color wheel. Because if you're going to use colors that are within the same general area of the color wheel where they lean, your painting is going to be more harmonious. Again, keeping in mind, we're not going to go fine art with this. I'm going to assume that you're working with portraits. You just want to play with the colors, see what you can do, work in an art journal. And then if you're wanting to go to do something like real fine art, stuff like a real fine art portrait, practice with this first, because you will grow out of the paints and then you'll be able to move on to the next level of paint. So what I did is I grabbed a whole bunch of paint and I did some swatches. And what I did with the swatches is I put the color down and then I added white to see the true underlying color, because sometimes the color is very dark and it's hard to see. The first question I asked myself is, what is the color? Well, of course, blue, 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 red, 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 yellow, and green. Is it light or is it dark? Doesn't matter for this. Is it bright or is it dull? Doesn't matter for this. Where does it lean on the color wheel? That's the key. That is the key. You have to be able to understand where it sits on the color wheel. If the paint color index number was on the back of the bottle, that'd be so much easier, but it's not. And the color index number is the actual identifier of the pigment used in the paint. So I look at this blue, and if I had to say, okay, well, that blue's still wet. Does that blue look like it has more green or more violet? To me, under the lighting conditions that I'm in right now, it looks like it leans a bit more towards violet. So I'm going to turn around, and I have that turn because something's drying. So I'm going to say blue-violet. And this is called true blue. Then I look at this one. Does this blue lean more towards violet or more towards green? Definitely not violet. This one is primary blue. Then this one here, this is, what is this? This is ultramarine blue. This definitely leans towards violet. This is ultramarine blue, and this is a blue violet. I'm going to say blue green. You don't need to do all this. It's just so I remember what I'm referring to. Then the three reds, let's see, it was, oh darn, primary red, true red, and naphthol red. Added some white, and what I'm looking for is something that leans towards orange. And this will all make sense in a second. And I like this one, and that one's naphthol red. Same thing with the yellows. That's going to be a challenge, because although this is okay, that's primary yellow. This is cad yellow. It doesn't lean towards green. I'm looking for a color. Every single color I'm putting in my palette either leans one way or the other. So the yellow has to lean towards orange, and then there's a yellow that has to lean towards green. The green has to lean towards yellow and has to lean towards blue. The blue has to lean towards violet and has to lean towards green. And the red has to lean towards blue and has to lean towards orange. Because then the colors that I'm going to be using, I'll be able to color mix almost any color I need, regardless of the skin tone I'm working on. Regardless of the color of the skin, I'll be able to create anything. Plus, it'll give me the colors to paint the shirts or a background, or if there's a pet with the person, or landscape or whatever, I'll have the colors. We're a bit more limited though with the craft paint. You may end up having to pick up extra colors to make up what you just can't color mix. So that's a concession you have to make. And then the green, is this green have more blue or have more yellow? Definitely, this is a green that's on the yellow side. So with the yellows, it's going to be challenging because none of these fit what I want. This is lemon yellow. This is cadmium yellow. This still leans more towards orange. I need a yellow that leans towards green, which is this, but this is way, way, way too light. This is way too light. So and I did this exercise with all the paints and basically picked out the ones that were best for me, which is what I ended up here. So now it's a matter of where they're going to sit on the color wheel. So I'm going to, and red violet I didn't bother using because I didn't need to. But red violet's a color that I like to put aside if I have to color mix alizarin crimson, but Americana has that color in there. All right. So the color leaning towards one way on the color wheel. So I'm going to start with the green. Because I've already done all these exercises, now it's just taking them and mapping them onto a color wheel. This is a green that leans towards yellow, and my color wheel is red, orange, yellow, yellow green, blue green, blue violet, then basically a red violet and red that leans towards. So, but you'll see as I go. So my color wheel, the green, is down here. And then we're going to take a little bit of white so you can see the true underlying color. And basically you're going to do this with all the colors. Then I have, what is this one? This is primary blue. And this is a blue that leans towards green. See, we don't have a green that leans towards blue. Not that I was able to pick up. It may be out there. I'm not in the position where, because I don't use craft paint, I'm not in the position where I want to buy every green paint out there just to find the right one. This is close to phthalo blue. And this is where you're going to get stuck. Typically you use blue and yellow to make green. Which blue? Which yellow? And because I'm limited on what I have, I am going to have to come to the understanding that I may not get the portrait colors that I want. And I won't know that until it actually comes to the time of preparing the palette. Ultramarine blue, blue that leans towards violet. This one's an easy one. This one's an easy one, but it's very weak. It is very, very weak. And that's one thing you have with the craft paint is it doesn't go as far. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It comes at a price point. You know, it's a lot less expensive. Then Alizarin Crimson is a red that leans towards violet, but it's not a real Alizarin Crimson. I don't know. It's not bad, but it's just not. It's okay. It's okay. So we have our two blues. We only have one green. So the other red is Naphthol red, which is a red that leans towards orange. You notice I didn't put it right in the middle because right in the middle is a neutral red. We don't have a neutral red. I have one that leans towards blue and one that leans towards orange. And the red that leans towards orange is very important for skin tones as well. All right, what's next? The yellows. Yeah, the yellows are going to be a little bit more challenging. This one's pretty easy. Primary yellow to yellow that leans towards orange. So typically orange would go right here. We don't need orange. That's going to go right there. That one's an easy one. So because I already did the exercises with the yellow, I have to decide what am I going to do. Do I want to choose this yellow and add a bit more orange to it, or this yellow to it, or am I going to take this yellow and then touch it up with a little bit of green, which is what I'm going to do. So I can turn around and say, well, I'm going to use cadmium yellow right there. And it does lean towards, more towards orange, but if I just take a touch, just add that in there, it does then lean a little bit more towards green. But what I should have done was split it in half, because that's the actual true color right there. And then take the white and go here. Hopefully that makes sense what I just did. So this is the actual cadmium yellow, and this is cadmium yellow with a speck of the green, and then I just added white to see the true underlying color. Alrighty, fresh paper towel. The earth tones are pretty easy. So true ochre, for those of you that use traditions, that yellow oxide, sits right about here. It's an earth tone that's yellowish. Add a bit of white. Very important color to portrait painting as well. Raw sienna is just as nice. Raw sienna, you can make something similar by taking true ochre and adding a little bit of burnt sienna. This one's a little bit darker. Add a little bit of white. Okay. Then burnt sienna. Traditional burnt sienna is how this one's called. It's a reddish brown. You may also know these colors as Venetian red, Indian red, English. Let's try that again. Venetian red, Indian red, English red. In oils, for me, it's well, depending on the brand of oil, Indian red and Venetian red. Transparent red iron oxide in the mixed media line, the fluid acrylics, and in the traditions would sit close to burnt sienna, but just be on the side because it's transparent. And then we have traditional burnt umber, which is a dark red. It's got a little bit of red in it. Dark brown. Okay. And then we have raw umber, which I don't use a lot, but it's great for toning canvases. And I like to put that on the bottom of the neutral thing because sometimes, depending on the lighting, it looks a little bit more on the green side. And that one's not too bad, it's more neutral. And then we have soft black, which I like to use. Well, traditionally I like to make my own black using blue and burnt sienna, but blue is usually more transparent. But if I want something opaque, I can bring in some carbon black into that. But this is soft black. And because I don't know what's really in these paints, and the burnt sienna does look a bit more transparent, I'll likely just use the soft black. And if I need to warm it up a bit, I can add a little bit of burnt sienna to it. If I want to cool it down a bit, I can add a little bit of blue. That's what makes it really flexible when you know how to read the color. There we go. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to push this aside. I'm going to write down the mixes on the paper, and then we'll do a review. Alrighty, so I wrote down all the mixtures, and I'm going to let you in a little secret after I explain the colors. So with this, we have our two reds, one that leans towards violet and one that leans towards orange. Covers off the two reds. The yellow, because I had to make something up to lean a bit more towards green, we have our primary yellow. We have our cadmium yellow, which was what I started off with, but then I added a touch of holly green in here and made it a little bit more on the green side. We have holly green, which is the green that leans towards yellow, but we don't have a green that leans towards blue. What can we do? Already from this exercise, we know, which I forgot to do, is we can take a little bit of the green, take a speck of the blue, more than that. Let's add a bit of white. Need to add a bit more blue to that. There we go. So now we have a green that leans a bit more towards blue. So this was holly green plus, I was going to call this phthalo blue, it's primary blue. Okay. So we now have our two greens, so you can see how you can do a little bit with it, but I wouldn't have known to add primary blue if I had not already done this color chart here. So we have our two blues. Primary blue leans a bit more towards green. Ultramarine blue leans a bit more towards violet. So we have our primary and secondary colors. We have our red, blue, yellow, and then we have our green. For portrait painting, you don't have to have the green. Depending on the skin tones, there may be some green undertones. We're using craft paint. It's easier just to use the green, but you don't have to, because you can take, the blue and try mixing it with one of the yellows. The earth tones, fairly straightforward. Traditional burnt sienna, reddish orange, reddish brown, I should say, raw sienna, true ochre, and I'm getting confused with the names because this true ochre is yellow ochre, what I know it as. And this PB, I'm thinking phthalo blue. No, it's primary blue. So if I stumble, I apologize. So true ochre, great for skin tones. Soft black, I use carbon black for the other line. Raw umber, great for creating some cool tones and doing a wash on the canvas first if you don't like painting on white. Traditional burnt umber, it's a dark brown that's got some red undertones to it. And then we have the snow titanium white. I just call it titanium white. So, that's we have there. So I want to let you in on a little bit of a secret. So this is one that's done with the DecoArt Media Fluid Acrylics. And other than the Alizarin Crimson mix, because in that line there is no Alizarin Crimson, I was able to make up another one by using quinacridone magenta, quinacridone burnt orange, and a bit of phthalo green on the blue side. That was fine. This is the chart with the DecoArt Traditions. This is what I love using because all the colors are there. I've got my two reds, I've got my two yellows, I got my two greens, my two blues, but look how intense those colors are. Then we have this one here. Then we have this is the DecoArt Americana Premium Acrylics. This one gave me the worst trouble because they don't have an alizarin crimson. There is no red orange. I had to make everything else up myself, and then I went to use a raw umber, and it looks like it's burnt umber, so I have to put an email out to them. And this particular one was the worst case scenario, because if you don't have anything, you have to start from somewhere, right? So I didn't have my phthalo green blue. I threw in Viridian. I didn't have burnt umber, so I made up my own. So it's a great way to, like what we did here, is to experiment. As long as you know that you need a red that goes towards blue, a red that leans towards orange, a blue that leans towards violet, a blue that leans towards green, a green that leans towards blue, a green that leans towards yellow, but greens are optional, and a yellow that leans towards orange, and a yellow that leans towards greens. Once you have that, you can do the same exercises in how to read the color by adding white and seeing the true color. Then you can put it down on your color wheel and get your neutrals on there, and that's primarily where you start, is this, learning how to read the color, creating your color wheel, and then experiment with that. Even that said, because this is craft paint, you will likely have to pull and reach from some other colors if you're looking on getting something that you just can't mix properly. And even this here, you may have a yellow that leans more towards green, better than this one, then use that. Okay, just use what you have to experiment, and then feel free to expand a little bit or grow a little bit. I just don't want you having 30 bottles of paint to do portrait painting, because you don't need it. So we're talking 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 bottles of paint plus black and white. I don't call black and white colors, but 12 bottles of paint plus black and white. It doesn't mean you're going to use all of them at the same time. What that means is that you can color mix almost any color you need for any skin tone, any landscape, any seascape, any figure drawing or painting, pet portrait, baby portrait, human baby portrait. It doesn't matter. That with keeping it limited, you can, color mix almost anything. But with the craft paint, you will just be aware that you're not going to get fine art quality, and you may have to reach for a couple more colors that you can't quite get. But once you've grown out of the craft paint, please, I would love you to try the DecoArt Americana Premium Acrylics. It's the next line up from this, to try that. And then if you like doing mixed media portrait work, go with the fluid acrylics, because they have all the pigment numbers on there too, full line, and you'll never go wrong with the traditions, because it's just absolutely beautiful. If you're an oil painter and you're watching this, the closest thing to working with oils I found is Golden Opens. That's an acrylic that works with oils. You can do the same thing with the traditions by having to work with extender. It's a long, tedious process, but you can do it. So if you have the traditions and you have extender, it can be done. But if you're an oil painter and you're just getting started with acrylics or something, Golden Opens is the closest thing that you're going to get to working with oils. But then the traditions, you just have to add extender as you go to keep the open time there. But you can also, over a few days, mix extender into the paints, stir to have the water evaporate, and then it will turn out to be like oils after a few days. But it is a long process. But that's something you can experiment with. Okay, anyway, so that's it. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Hop on over to the private Facebook group and throw in some questions there. If you tried some mixing and the colors didn't quite come out, post a picture. There's, I'm in there. There's a lot of super helpful people in there that will be more than happy to share what they've learned. If you get stuck, you can also send me an email on my website. But the Facebook group is a great place to go, because everybody else there may have some ideas that I don't have, and it's just a great way to share tips and techniques as well. Alrighty, so I'm going to clean up now. I just got paint over my beautiful table, and I'm going to be creating another set of lessons. I'm tongue-tied now. I'm going to create another set of lessons now about taking the paints that you've used here and to actually prepare a portrait palette. Because when you're painting portraits, you want to try to have your mixes done ahead of time, especially if you're working from a live model or you're painting your hand. You don't want to spend all your time color mixing. So we're going to prepare a preset palette of colors that you can work from. So until I see you in that lesson, stay inspired.